Dante starts out life as a frame that looks to be great, especially if you are trying to scan targets, because his passive being able to do that is great. But he basically has one weapon, the Nocta, his exalted weapon that has its light verse, its dark verse, and then its final verse. The final verse using the last two verses cast, meaning, I love the fact they've actually added this, you can have two dark verses for tragedy, a light verse followed by a dark verse for word warden, you can have a dark verse followed by a light verse for page flight, or two light verses for triumph. Where's the two dark verses for tragedy? Yeah. I am really excited for this frame. To farm him, his parts do drop from the new disruption mission from the Sanctum, and I was corrected in how these vessel capillaries drop because it says per necromech. I will correct myself, I should have read this. It's the demolisher necromechs that spawn when you activate a conduit in disruption, because you can come and see Lloyd at any point, go to research Dante, and all of his parts and weapon parts are actually available here. And building him just uses the usual parts that you get from actually doing these missions anyway, with Entrati lanthorns, circuits. Yeah, it doesn't actually cost an insane amount to build him. What costs a lot is the fact that you need those vessel capillaries to actually buy his blueprint for 270, and then it's 90 per part. He may have an alternate helmet, I do prefer the original one, and he comes with the fabled any polarity. I'm saying any polarity, it's called a universal polarity, but it basically means you can run any aura in here for any polarity you want, and it will instantly double the points available for this frame. That is great. They need to start doing this with more frames. Primes especially. Dante, not so bothered, you can just put one in there, but the primes should always come with this polarity in, because they are primes. And it saves me having to form it again, meaning, yeah, I'm definitely putting another V in here at least, but does have a V and a dash. I will openly admit to completely forgetting he has an exalted weapon, and that means before you jump into any gameplay, you need to hit this button. I went 2 missions thinking this thing sucked before I remembered. The Nocta is an exalted weapon. You have to mod it separately to his normal mods. That does in fact say 48,121.7 total damage. Split across corrosive and radiation. Yes, that's because I wanted the corrosive on this. Could do it for viral, that just depends how you want to set it up. With 129.1% crit chance. Versus the Grimoire, that does not even come close to those numbers. Crit never goes over 100, whether it be its normal attack or its alternate attack. And yeah, you're talking about 8,500 damage versus 48,100. Yes, at first the Nocta may look like a pile of junk. It isn't. I think one of the best parts about Nocta is this is what I wanted the Grimoire to be, an enemy melter. It has infinite punch through. It's just, its alternate attack has infinite punch through. I should correct myself on that one. It just worked so well. The fact you can put multiple tome mods on this, yeah, that's a nice feature, but it's kind of thrown flying out of the window when you were doing 4,500 base damage, and the alternate attack can hit every enemy in front of you because it has infinite punch through, and it does 48,121.7 total damage with 129.1% crit chance and a 6.3 times multiplier. Does somebody want to do the math? 48,121.7 times 6.3. Yeah. That's 303,000 damage. Plus some. This thing, I have seen this hit for millions of damages. Not a little bit of damage. This thing, you have to remember, you can also use a normal secondary with this. This is a exalted weapon. Cast the first ability, this will be summoned, and you can attack enemies with it. And then put it away and use your normal secondary. Or primary, whichever one you want to be using. And then go back to using this. I was shocked that they actually gave us something that is actually this good for a change. Rather than nerf it through the floor as well, which I did expect, which is why one of the reasons I have waited so long to actually use him. Nocta, we're off to a great start with this frame. Then we get on to, very quickly, Lightverse, his second ability, grants him and his allies, Overguard, and increases their health. This, I have seen this give insane amounts of overshields. It works ridiculously well, but it does have a cap. Its base cap is 15,000, I believe it is, total extra overshields, and modded can be 29,000 plus overguard. Yeah, it's nuts. It also has a really nice radius to it, doesn't cost a lot of power, and that's his Lightverse. The Darkverse draws blood from nearby enemies, inflicting slash damage upon them. Yes, his second ability deals a slash dash, we all kind of wish, slash damage to any enemy that's in front of him, making, basically, as was expected, Lightverse is a buff slash heal thing for allies, and Darkverse damages enemies. Then there is his final ability, Final Verse. This will take the last two verses casts and turn them into something better. So 2 light verses will turn into Triumph. That this one's great. Up to 3,000 unmodded, higher if you mod it, extra overshield. So light verse by itself can give overguard and increase your health. This basically does exactly the same thing. A lot of people will be pissed that I said that. I honestly don't care. But it does. But instead of it being 350 overguard, it's 3,000. So casting Light Verse twice and then casting Final Verse for Triumph means quite a lot of overshields. Kills and assists briefly regenerate overguard as well, making it even better. Or you have 2 Dark Verses, then cast Final Verse, and I like this one. Tragedy. Any damage over time you have suffered accumulates into a single blast. So you basically cast this and annihilate everything in the room. This is where the line of sight was a huge problem that they have kind of fixed and went, we can't see any other problems with it, so we're done. This was one of the reasons I didn't do this when he first came out, and I am aware it is... I'm going to say June, but it's actually the 30th of May. He's been out since the 27th of March, I believe. Yeah, that line of sight issue. It's slightly annoying, but only with Tragedy. Casting 2 Dark Verses, because 12,610 damage. 6,500 base, but he's modded, so 12,610 base damage. Slash, should say, it causes slash damage, so, you know, causes bleed out afterwards. Oh, this ability is amazing. But you don't have to just go 2 light and 2 dark. You can also go for probably the best perks about him. Word Warden. A light verse followed by a dark verse kind of creates a Noctua that hovers around you and any allies that are within range that will then, and I love this one, attack with their designated allies' attacks. So an ally shoots at an enemy, the floating Noctua next to them will do the same thing. This goes for yours as well. Remembering, the Noctua can have an insane amount of damage to it, so being able to use that as a a weapon that is separate to the weapon you're using, this is probably one of the better support things I've seen them put on a frame in ages. Instead of having one weapon, you and any allies that were within range will now have two. But as you could probably imagine, if you flip that round and do a dark verse followed by a light verse, you summon the Paragrim that swoops at enemies, making them vulnerable to status chance and status damage. Really wish it was crit, but status works just as well as drawing enemy attacks away from allies. I love this one. I will spam light verse for the overshields all the time. Then go light verse, dark verse, final verse. Dark verse, light verse, final verse. This frame, I hated him at first. There is a slight learning curve to him, but once you've gotten round that learning curve and you realise that his abilities work so well together, he is not just one of possibly the best supporting frames, with light verse giving overshields, overguard, and increasing health to you and allies, but then final verse with 2 lights casts Triumph that then gives extra overguard that regenerates upon killing an enemy, and it casts a bigger overguard than just the light verse. So you have overguard, then a massive overguard that will regenerate over time as long as you are gaining kills, and then you have the dark verse that draws blood from nearby enemies, inflicting slash damage upon them, mixed with tragedy that will take incoming damage and throw it out. There's another ability that does this, and I'm not going to mention for different reasons because it's not technically on any frame. So spamming dark verse also kind of works, but throw in a word warden, a light then a dark, and a page flight, a dark then a light, and you have a support frame that can deal a nice amount of damage and isn't a raging wimp like a lot of the other support frames are, because he has a decent armor. Long ago, a lot of the supporting frames had 10, 15, 25, and it became 50. To be fair, I've got no idea what they're even at these days. I think they finally actually went in and made things like Trinity have a lot more armor, because they used to have 15, whereas this one has a lot more. I mean, Trinity now is 105, whereas Dante is 145. Still technically more armor, though Trinity can full heal your health. I mean, Trinity with full health, Dante overguards that regenerate themselves as long as you're killing enemies. I would say Dante may be one of the better supporting frames when it comes to shield regeneration, because he's able to give so huge an overguard with a light verse, then a light verse, just a final verse cast of those 2 light verses, and you have an insane amount of overshields. I know it's called overguard, but overguard just sounds really weird when it's just overshields. Lovely feature that they added a long time ago, by the way, but this is probably one of the first frames that has utilized it in this extreme. He was definitely worth the possibly insane farming times to get. And lastly, there's only one thing left to do: feed his dark verse ability to Helminth, because subsuming this frame means Helminth will pull the dark verse ability off him, so you can put it on any other frame. Yeah. All we can really say is goodbye, Dante. You were kind of fun. And with that, we'll leave this here. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.